expired. I yield back, Madam Chair.
The lady's time has expired. The gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Renacci, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. It's interesting. First, I want to go back to my colleague, Mr. Cole, and say the exact same thing. We could sit here all day and fire bullets back and forth on political issues, but that's not going to solve the issues of the day, because the issue of the day is that we have to get a budget, and we have to live with a budget. And before we can even get a budget, we have to figure out where we're at, which is another problem around here. I have mentioned since day one that we don't have a complete record of financial information because we don't allow for all of our debts to be added up, and we don't use the information we have then to make decisions, and then we don't look at the past of the decisions we made. As a business guy for 30 years, and actually a business guy that took over 60 failed businesses and successfully turned them around, you have to see where you're at first before you can go forward. So my frustration always builds when we start to get into these political talking points, because everybody's district is going to have issues that concern them. My district, I can tell you, the businesses, the people, the individuals are all concerned about tax reform, regulation reform, and Obamacare reform. So again, it's not what the district, it's what we can do as far as putting a budget together and getting things moving. But Dr. All, don't we have the record revenues in the Treasury over the last few years?
That's right. Well, I'm not sure the record. They're certainly above average right now, and they're going to actually go up as a share of GDP, so we don't have declining revenues.
Right. So we have record revenues, and in my business world, what I would find if you had record revenues, you were really doing really well, except when you had record expenditures that were exceeding those record revenues. And I heard you say earlier that one of our issues is that we are spending, our biggest problem really is our spending problem. Would you agree?
Well, yes, that's the major contributor to the deficit.
So until we come together as Republicans and Democrats and realize we have spending issues and we're not going to tax our way out of this, and we can put a budget together, I think that's the starting point that I hope at some point this committee can get to, having a good, solid budget that then we live with. My concerns, again, it's extremely alarming that our interest in our national debt is projected to nearly quadruple to $768 billion in 2027. It appears that as numbers continue to grow, we're going to have less, and the time is now to start looking at our spending side, because if we just sit back and start saying the last president was great, the president before that was great, and we don't do anything, we're going to be in a deeper, deeper hole in the next few years. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the sooner we get to solving the deficit problem, whether it's spending or whether it's taxes or anything, but the sooner we start to address that, the less of a change it's going to be, the easier it's going to be to try to deal with it.
Well, and I think the sooner we recognize it, it's one of the reasons why I introduced the fiscal state of the nation, which would require the Comptroller General to come before the House and Senate, a joint session of Congress. I had almost 170 co-sponsors, Republicans and Democrats. I'd actually hope that new members here would join me as we've refiled that bill. But do you agree that it would be a good starting point to have someone, the Comptroller General, come before the House and Senate and explain our growing deficits and where the numbers are occurring and what's going on, so we have a starting point?
Absolutely. Hopefully we're providing some of that information to you, but yes.
I understand. And that's what you're doing here today. But I think the importance is, as we continue to look at these numbers, we have to start to realize that the growth of our federal debt is another issue concerns me, and I heard one of my colleagues earlier talk about this. If we do nothing, I think the federal debt is projected to grow, if we just stay on the same track, $9.6 trillion in the next 10 years. Is that correct?
That's right.
So these are all issues that I hope that my colleagues on both sides of the aisle can start talking about as to ways we can work together to come up with a solution and a budget. I also have another bill which I think is so important. When we pass a budget, we should follow a budget. We've had a budget act since 1974. Most people don't realize that even though we pass budgets, we never follow them. Members from this committee, other committees come to the floor, pass bills that break the budget. If we're ever going to make things work, we have to come up with a solid budget and live with that budget and not break the budget. So I'm hoping that we can continue to work forward with these numbers. I appreciate the information. There's plenty of information in your report if everybody takes the time to read them. We are not going in a great direction. We do not have a healthy economy. We have what I would call we have an anemic economy. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Thank you. I yield back.
The gentleman's time has expired. The gentlelady from Florida, Ms. Wasserman Schultz, is now recognized for